So as I am quite happy with my little glamour glow that I applied on her with my recipe, I think we can actually delete these glamour glows that we created here, but I think definitely try them out if you like to apply only the glamour glow of the NYX collection, or if you want to create your own glamour glow in Photoshop. But for now I will just delete these, and then I also don't need this effect, and I just keep the Color Effects Pro. So this layer we will now delete, and then I will create a new one where I add the color effects and all these layers back together, and with Shift Alt Command and E I will have now my body transformation layer. Body transformation, because as we said in the beginning, we want to, we already put her into this position where she's a little bit side on, which normally slims the body, but although we shaped the arm already with Dodge and Burn, I think we can help her out a little bit more with the liquify tool. But the one thing that I always do before is that I actually stretch out most of the people just to reduce the lens distortion a little bit, and for that I will go into Command and T, and with that I will just pull her up just a little bit. Obviously not that she gets weird and stretchy, but yeah, if we just go overboard then that looks weird, but I normally just do it like this little bit just to stretch the picture a tiny bit so I can just reduce any possible lens distortion. And from then on I will go into filter, and therefore I will go into my liquify, or you can press the shortcut here with Shift Command X. So let's do our body shaping now in liquify. And here you have a few different solutions. If you don't work with the newest version of Photoshop, if you're still working with CS6 and so on, then these were your only options. You can use this forward warp tool, you can go onto the blow tool, the pucker tool, and so on. And now with the newer versions, Photoshop tries already to identify certain areas of a face that you might want to change. So now you see here different options for the eyes. You can change already the left or the right eye size, for example. You can change the height, the nose, the mouth, the face shape, and so on, which can be very helpful, because then you don't have to actually go in and adjust anything manual. However, it's quite clever, but it's not always clever, because I shoot a lot of images from above, which means that the person is actually the opposite side around, and then Photoshop doesn't really understand where are the eyes or where is the nose, because then if it's slightly different and the person doesn't look straight to you, even if it's more like a side angle, that could potentially confuse Photoshop. So let's try if Photoshop understands here what are her eyes. So let's say we want to change this eye a little bit, because this looks a lot smaller than this eye. So let's try to just get this a little bit bigger. And if we say to the Photoshop tool here, okay, it's her left eye. Does it recognize it? Yes, it does recognize her eye, and we could potentially go all the way up. I don't want to make pictures normally too symmetrical. I know that normally people with most symmetrical face sides are considered most beautiful, but whenever you try to mirror something in Photoshop, it can also look a little bit freaky. So I try to still keep it natural, but I think if we just bring her eye up a little bit, then this I think should be okay. And now we could obviously do the opposite with the right eye, or her left eye, and say, okay, maybe we bring this down a little bit. So maybe something like that. And then we can also see the eye height. Should we change anything there? I think maybe we could also bring this up, and then maybe just this a little bit down. The eye width, should it be smaller? No, I think the eye width is probably quite okay. The eye tilt might be interesting for her left eye, for our right eye. Maybe we just tilting this a bit. Yeah, it can start to be a bit creepy if you change people's faces too much. I mean, as I said, with this image, I'm not too concerned. I'm not treating this like a normal client, because with a client, I wouldn't actually change too many things because I want that it looks more natural. But with this one, we said it's a bit more of a fantasy image, and therefore we can go a little bit overboard and just see, okay, what might be like the perfect psychic or the perfect fortune teller for this one. So we can also see the nose height, but I think her nose and her mouth, that fits actually quite good together. The nose width, no, I think that's also good. I wouldn't give her too small of a nose. I think that all fits really well. Now it can also be creepy sometimes if we change the smile, but it could be maybe a little bit. The upper lip we can probably make a little bit bigger. The lower lip maybe a tiny bit. The mouth width you can change, and the mouth height we can probably bring it up a little bit. And now we can also have a look at the overall face shape, so we can go into her forehead and see, does this anything? But because she has already this this kind of cloth on her head, then it's probably not really worthwhile doing anything there. The chin height might be interesting, maybe a little bit, I don't know, maybe just a tiny bit. Okay, and the jawline, we can make the face wider or narrower. I think maybe a little bit wider, just a little bit. And the face width, I think, I wouldn't change too much with that. I think I just keep it at 0. But this way you have obviously a lot of options where Photoshop says already, okay, maybe some people, they are obviously, very different in eye size, or if they actually tell you, I think my nose is too wide, then you could change this here. So just, play with it, but try to keep it overall that it still looks natural in a way, and that the person isn't like, oh my God, this is like completely different. So if you don't have these tools here at all, then I will also show you what you can do with these tools on the left side here. But for that, let's just say okay for now, so that we can compare later maybe what we like better. And the problem is now that the best thing, if you are not quite sure if you like your adjustments, I wouldn't actually toggle it on and off, because then anything you do to somebody's face can look very, very drastical. I think that's often the case when even people say, okay, I don't like my nose, and then they have like a nose job, so they actually have like an operation and then they make it smaller. And then they could actually wake up and think, oh, this looks really weird now in comparison to my eyes, or, to my chin height or whatsoever. I think it's really weird, because the moment you change one tiny thing of a face, then everything else can look a little bit out of place. And therefore, if you toggle it on and off, you could say now, oh my God, this looks awful, she looks completely different. So what I rather have that you're doing is that you're now stepping away from your screen, have a cup of coffee, or I don't know, just keep yourself occupied with something else for a few moments, and then you come back to your image. And if you like it then just keep it. And don't do anything else. But if you say, nee, this looks now really weird, then you can go in and then you can toggle it on and off, and then you can say, maybe I went a bit overboard with her left eye. So as I'm not recommending it, but for now, let's just see how we like the before and after. So if we just click the body transformation off, then obviously she is now a little bit down, and her eyes are a little bit changed, but I don't think we went too crazy and overboard. So I think this looks really nice. But now let's just copy the same thing one more time. And if we just toggle this off and we bring in another layer, Shift-Alt-Command-E, and then we just call this Body Transformation Manual. And then we just go in one more time and say, okay, let's try it in a way as if you don't have this right stuff available. So if you don't have anything of that, then let's see what we can do just with the warp or with the blow tool, for example. But for that, we just want to go in really close. So let's go in like that. and just bring this up a little. And now we can say, okay, we want that this eye is a little bit bigger, and with control and alt, I just bring this in smaller. Or you can also change the size up here, size and density, and the rate and the pressure. So if you have the pressure and the density too high, then your whole any kind of transformation that you're doing might be a bit too extreme. So normally I always advise to have this here in the mid-range between 50 and 60, and this way you can just work a little bit more carefully. And then you just go a little bit up here, because we said we want that this eye is a bit bigger. And then we just have to imagine that there is some kind of line here that we can see that the eye is kind of like on the same level and maybe a bit more together here. And then we can do the opposite on the other eye when we just say, okay, we bring this down a little bit. We can also make this even smaller and change her eyebrow so it looks more raised like here. We could also just make this thicker. Just pull this up a little bit. Maybe bring this a bit in. Maybe bigger, and we're bringing this still maybe really big. So we're just bringing this overall up, and then this overall a bit down. And then we could go back to the nose and say we just tiny bit straighten this up or bring this in. Maybe bring the whole nose a little bit in, and then the lips up a little bit. We gave her this tiny smile. Maybe this bit down. Something like that. Yeah, maybe we can go in and bring this a little bit up here. And then we said, okay, maybe we want this still a little bit bigger. And for that we can go into this blow tool and kind of bring it to her eye size. And if we just click once on it, then you can also just just enlarge this whole area. And I think now this looks pretty similar. And if you want to do the opposite on the other eye, this is this tucking or pucker tool, and this makes it a bit smaller. So if I just bring this in, makes this bigger, and now if I click once on it, the eye is smaller, but I think maybe that's too extreme. If I go back one step, I think actually this doesn't have to be so small. But I think we kind of stretched her pupil here now. So I want to go in one more time and say this looks now a bit weird actually. So let's bring this pupil a little bit more back in, and so it's a bit more round. Yeah, I think this looks probably quite good. And we could also just bring her lips up even more, so it's more this little bit of a smile. Okay, let's zoom out to see what it looks like overall. Yeah, I think that's okay. So the other thing that we said is that we wanted to bring her arm in. And obviously, like with everything in Photoshop, you have different ways again. You could also use this push left tool where you kind of moving up and down or left and right to bring things in. For me, I never used it because I kind of grew up with this warp tool. But play with it. If this also can be very effectful to slim people down because you can push sides in. But for me, I always thought it's easier with this warp tool. And I just bring in this bigger brush again, and then just very carefully just bringing in her arm. So I'm just pushing this down and just a little bit, just so that we just create her arm how it was before, because it's not really that big in real life, and we just want that it looks as flattering as possible. And obviously be careful, because anytime you have like a line or a table or like lines in the background, you have to just be a bit careful that you don't warp them also, because then it's very embarrassing if somebody is like, look at me, I'm so skinny, and then you see all these warps in the background, all these lines, and you can see that they obviously faked this in Photoshop and that they tried to slim themselves this way. So yeah, just be careful that all these all the body transformation, that this looks natural. So if you warp now the background here, that's not really a problem, because later anything where the background is now a little bit missing, it's going to be fixed with the background underneath. I will show you what I mean with this in a second. So I'm not worried about that, because I don't see here any specific lines in this area, so that's fine. And I'll just bring in a bit more. I think this looks all good. So yeah, I think her arm looks good. And yeah, normally another thing I always do is that I give the hair more volume. That's obviously here a little bit tricky because of this cloth on her head, but I could bring out maybe this hair a little bit, and I could also bring her shoulder a little bit down so it looks a bit more relaxed. But as yeah, usually you have to be careful if there are any environments or like any items that you might warp as well. So just keep that in mind, that you could mask this here, but I never really put in a mask or anything. I normally mask it out on the layer itself. For me, that works best. So we could just go in like that, bringing this down even more. We could widen this here overall, just to give a bit more shape. I think her face, that looks nice. I wouldn't really shape here anymore. If you have somebody with a really wide face, and this is obviously nice, because then you can just push this in a little bit, just so it's a bit more flattering, because for some people this wouldn't be a nice head position, because most people actually look nicer when they're a little bit angled this way, because then the face looks slimmer. But in her case, that's not really necessary. So I would say this looks pretty good. So we just go okay. And as I said, yeah, the problem is now if you go before after, it might shock you. So normally just step away now and come back and then judge if you like the image or not. But obviously I want to show you this stuff that we've done. So as you remember here, if I zoom in one more time, here we had the problem in the liquify tool that we saw the empty pixels. And as I said, because we have this image layer underneath, then Photoshop fills this back in, because actually that was this gloss on the old layer, and because we have no texture here, we get away with that. Otherwise now you could bring in a mask and then you could just paint on it, and this way you can also bring in any missing background, for example. So if we go before and after, if we just go down a little bit, before after, so now we also fixed her eye a little bit, we gave the hair a bit more shape, we just reduced the arm down a little bit, pushed the other arm in a little, and I think this looks nice. If we compare this now with the kind of automatic way how Photoshop was fixing stuff, we can also just toggle this on and say, okay, this was obviously, we are missing here the transformation up, but if we just look at the Photoshop before after, then that also did a good job. But I would say for now, our manual job might have been even a little bit better, so that we just brought these eyes out, that's a little bit more equal. And I will think, okay, now we can obviously just do the same thing, how we stretched the whole layer. So if I go Command and T, then I can also just lift her up a little bit like this. So I think this looks pretty nice. However, if you have a client that is really worried that the eyes are not perfectly symmetrical, in the next step I will show you another trick how you can achieve a more symmetrical face.